guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today because today we can finally do our Halloween project. I've been super excited to work on this. So today's project is kind of inspired off of this blanket I got. It's a Halloween one, and the little eyes and paws and stuff like that on it actually glow in the dark. And I thought it'd be really cool to find some glow in the dark fabric and make an art doll that completely glows. And what better creature to make completely glow in the dark than something skeleton? So we're going to be making a glow in the dark skeleton dragon. Anyways, let's get started. Okay, so this piece is going to be a real challenge. We have a bunch of clay pieces to make and a ton of sewing because I want to try and get as many bone details into this dragon as possible. So I'm going to start on our skull first. So just like my normal clay heads, I'm going to have a lump of tin foil connected to glass containers so I have something to hold on to. Except with the skull, we want the eyes to be sunken in. So I'm going to kind of adjust the shape of the tin foil to be a little bit more sunken in on those sides. Once I have that shaped, I can start covering this in clay and figuring out the basic shape that I want for the skull. Once I have a basic shape laid out, I can start figuring out where I want the nostril holes to go and the eye sockets. One thing that I decided to do reference-wise with this skull was, obviously I looked at a bunch of different reptiles, but I also kind of looked at a coyote skull because I thought it was a very similar shape that I wanted to get out of the dragon's skull. So I kind of pulled inspiration from a bunch of different things because obviously I couldn't look up a dragon skull as a reference. I mean, I could have looked up other art styles of dragon skulls, but I wanted to try and get my own. I didn't want to really copy someone else's design. And then once I have a rough idea of where all of my features are going to be on the skull, I can start working on cleaning up the base of it, kind of thinning it out a little bit, and then I'm going to start adding a bottom jaw to this. So a lot of skulls have it to where you kind of see the mandible in the eye socket, so I'm going to add that feature, and then I'm going to start building up the bottom jaw underneath the face. Now for the teeth, I actually want to have them kind of sticking out a little bit more. So to make them a little bit sturdier, I'm gonna basically just take little pieces of wire and stick them in the clay face where I want the teeth. And then I'm going to bake the head, and then I'll switch over to using my epoxy sculpt clay. So once that's out of the oven and is cooled to touch, I'm going to start working on the teeth, and then I'm also going to be adding my horns. I made these actually quite a while ago when I was debating on making a glow-in-the-dark creature. So these have pretty much my glow-in-the-dark glitter in them, and they're just made out of resin. So I'm going to connect them to the skull, and then I'm going to start using my epoxy clay to blend them into the skull and just adjust the shape to make up for adding the horns. And then we're going to use the same clay to add our teeth. Now, the other clay pieces that we're going to be working on are a couple bones in the legs and, of course, the feet. So let's get started on the leg bones. With the front legs, the first bone is going to be fabric, and then the next is actually going to be a set of 2 bones. So I have a wireframe that splits off, so you can have 2 different bones for that section, and we're going to start covering this in clay. Now for this, I am going to be using my epoxy sculpt because it's pretty thin and I don't want anything to break. Now with this section, I had to wait in between doing different bones. I had to let them cure just so I didn't have to worry about messing them up by grabbing onto them and just jamming my thumb into it or something like that. So these took a few days to actually make just because I didn't want to mess anything up while I was working on them. And then for making the clay feet, what we're going to do is we're going to start off with a wire frame. That way each toe has its own support. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with our Sculpey clay and just make the base of the foot. And then once I have that sculpted, I've broken it up into different bones and we've baked it, I can then switch over to my epoxy sculpt and use that for the toes. I figured the toes would be a lot more fragile than the rest of the foot, so I'm going to mainly use that clay on this. Now that I have all of my clay pieces done, we can start on the painting. And surprisingly, I'm actually not going to be painting them with glow-in-the-dark paint right away. That's going to be done after we paint them with other colors. And the main reason for that is most glow-in-the-dark paint is really transparent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up some colors that look very similar to the tones of glow-in-the-dark paint, and I'm going to do all the details and stuff this way. So I'm going to start off with kind of a really pale greenish yellow, and then I can lighten it up more and adjust it and add shadows and stuff. And then once that's done, I can go over it with my glow-in-the-dark paint to kind of create a thin layer that goes over everything. So honestly, there's not a whole lot of detail in the painting for these clay pieces. It's just a lot of work because of all the different layers and different things that I need to do. Now another thing that I did to make our clay pieces glow even more was when I resin them, because I usually resin my clay pieces to help protect the paint job. So when I did that, I mixed in my glow-in-the-dark glitter into the resin. That way I could add just a little bit more glow feature to them, because the glow was a little dull and I didn't want the resin to make it even duller. Okay, so all of our clay pieces are done and now it's time for the sewing. So you're probably wondering how I'm going to make the body itself glow, and pretty much I have some glow-in-the-dark fabric that I found online, and this stuff is just super cool. I can't wait to put everything together and show you guys. But anyways, here is the pattern that we're going to be using to make our dragon. I've got some sections that are going to go down the back of our dragon. I've got the kind of vertebra and spine and ribs, and then I've got kind of an inside section that's going to be the main body. This will kind of be something that will be covered up in more bones, and it's just so that I have more room to work with for the wireframe. And then of course we've got the bones for the wings, which are going to be pretty interesting to try out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get all of my fabric cut out and we're going to get some sewing done with the sewing machine. So with majority of the bones, we have just a top and bottom. There's nothing really complex with them. So I'm just going to pin 2 pieces of fabric together. I have my pattern sketched out, and I'm just going to sew along all the lines. This is going to be how I do all the ribs and pretty much every bone. There might be a few that I might have to make some adjustments for. But we're going to get everything sewn together, then we can cut off the excess fabric and we can start making the different sections of the body. So for the wings, I have this main piece first. It's pretty thin, but I'm gonna stuff it and then we can run it onto the wire frame. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take our little finger pieces, which these took forever to flip right side out. I actually bruised the palm of my hand. I had to take a day off because it just took so long with a pair of pliers because they were so thin. But I'm going to take those and I'm going to run them onto the wires for each finger piece. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sew everything together and close that up. I also have a glow-in-the-dark claw that I'm going to attach as well. I'm going to use actually these later on in the body too, so I have a bunch of extra ones that I made. So I'm going to get all of the finger pieces sewn in place, and then once I have that done, I'm going to take that extra bone that we're going to have on the side of the wing. So I'm going to add just a wire. I'm not going to really stuff this too much. Don't really need to, but I do want the wire to help it hold its shape more. And then I'm going to sew it right around where our claw is, and then further down right where the joint for the next bone is going to be. Now, the design of these wings was actually pretty simple and they look really cool in the dark. I just couldn't wait. I had to see what they looked like in the dark. So yeah, I'm really happy with these. Now for the rest of the dragon, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making all of the bones and stuff as we add them to the wireframe. So I have a wireframe set up. It's pretty reinforced because the clay head is kind of heavy. And what I'm going to do first is add the wireframe of the wings to the rest of the wireframe. To do this without making it really complicated, I'm going to take the main fabric for the body section and I'm going to run the wing sections through a hole in it, and then we can connect the wings to the wireframe. Then what we'll do is we'll take the wires for the legs and we'll run those through some holes in the body as well. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take our clay head and I'm going to glue it to the end of the wire for the neck. Then we're going to take our fabric for the neck and then I'm going to start gluing that around the base of the head. You notice this is where I decided to add my glow-in-the-dark claws, is around the neck, because I thought it would look really cool to have them around where the horns were. And then once I have that glued in place around the base of the head and it's dried a little bit, I'm going to start closing up the neck. And while I'm doing that, I'm also going to be sewing in place those extra little spikes that are going to go down the back of the neck. Now to close up the body of the dragon, we're going to need a belly piece, and I thought I'd do something really cool with this by adding some glow-in-the-dark scales. And I thought the easiest way to make glow-in-the-dark scales was to get glow-in-the-dark stars and cut them up. So it's kind of like scale mail, but glow-in-the-dark. So I'm going to sew all of these in place, and then we can attach this to the body of the dragon and start stuffing and closing that section up. Next, I'm going to add the fabric for the tail over the wire for the tail. So I'm going to sew this in place at the body, just kind of wherever I want to connect it, because I'm going to kind of have this overlap a little bit. And then we're going to sew this closed. And with something this thin, we're going to have to stuff and close it up at the same time. Okay, so we have the spine of the dragon all assembled, and now we need to start working on the legs. So each front and back leg is going to have a more fabric type bone first. So I'm going to sew that in place on the body, going around the wire frame. And then what we're going to do is we're going to adjust our wires to add our clay pieces. And I'm going to take our bone for the lower portion of the leg. I'm going to connect that to the wire frame. I can glue the other section around the base of it, and then we can start stuffing and closing this section up. Now to add the foot, I have a wire attached to the foot, and we're going to shorten this and we're going to glue it in place in a hole that I've drilled at the base of the bone. So I'm just going to glue these in place, and then I'm going to cover up this section with a strip of fabric. So I'm going to glue that around, and then I'll close up the back by just stitching it shut. And then for doing the back legs, the process is basically the same. It just looks a little different because the bones are shaped a little bit more differently than the front bones were. Okay, so our dragon is pretty much assembled. It's just missing a couple bones, mainly the rib cage and then some shoulder blades. So for the rib cage, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to, obviously I have it flipped right side out, I'm going to stuff everything and I'm going to add wires to the larger ribs. That way we can pose them around the rest of the body. And then I'm going to take the little spikes that are going down the back of it and I'm going to sew those in place while stuffing the rest of the rib cage. Now these spikes continue going down the back of the dragon a little bit more than the rib cage, so when we connect this to the body, we're just going to sew the very top portion to the body, and then we're going to continue sewing those spikes going down the back of the dragon. And then for the shoulder blades, I'm just going to stuff these lightly, and then I'm going to sew them closed and sew them right above where the front leg bone is. And then I'll use a few stitches here and there to like pin them upwards so they don't like flop down. Now after doing this, I realized I probably needed to add something to the back legs just a little bit more, so I made a real quick pattern and I basically did the same thing that I did with the shoulder blades with these bone pieces. Now the last thing that we need to do is actually kind of separate the bones. So I want this to not be like super like dark, so I'm going to use a few different colors to go along with the glowy look of our bones, but I'm going to be using my fabric markers and I'm just going to kind of draw in between the different sections to break up the skeleton. That way when this glows in the dark, you'll actually see the bones separated and it's not just one big bone shape. Okay guys, and here is our glow-in-the-dark skeleton dragon. I had so much fun with this project. He was definitely a lot of work, especially all of the sewing and stuff, and even all the clay pieces. It took me a while. I had to start this pretty far in advance to get it out in time for you guys to see around Halloween. But yeah, I'm going to have him in my shop, so you can check the links down below if you want to buy him. I've also got a few other art dolls. I recently had a bunch of sales going on because we're actually moving, and I wanted to get rid of everything, so it's a little smaller of a shop right now, but I'm hoping to do a few more sales, possibly, depending on how much space I need in the moving truck. But yeah, he will be in there on my website. And while you're down there, you'll see a bunch of other links to different art supplies and stuff that I like to use to make my art dolls. I'll try to make sure to link the glow-in-the-dark fabric and stuff that I use to make him as well. But yeah, these are affiliated links, so if you do buy anything through them, it does help support the channel. And like I said, we are going to be moving soon, so there might be a little bit of a pause in art doll videos. I think my idea, so I don't end up like not posting anything, is to do a few digital art drawing videos, so that might be the next few videos for a little bit while I deal with moving, because we're going out of state and it's going to be a little intense because it's just me and Michael, which is that's not a lot of people to do a full move. But anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.